And that's the purpose of today's episode. You have an experience and a background in criminal. Now you've done 3 years of civil. I had a similar background, and John has done both cases as well. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to go through a variety of topics and how things are different, how things are similar. And I think we should start with the clients. I'll say that the one thing that we have in common between criminal and civil is we're helping human beings. And for me, that's super important. And that was the concern I had when I left doing criminal exclusively. I said, well, I know I'm going to help people, but is it the same degree? There's a huge emotional component when you're representing someone with their liberties at stake. Not as much when it's just money at stake, but then you do it longer. And I realized, no, these people who need us, they've been hurt badly often. And justice is just as important for them as it is for the criminal side. Keila, what do you think now that you've done it a few years?
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of similarities between, representing people in the criminal realm because, these are individuals that were arrested by the cops and they, and when you're representing them against the government, right? With all of the force of the government behind them. And on the plaintiff side, even though in trial, and I'm sure we'll get here, we are prosecuting the case, quote unquote, it's the same.
Keila, you're not allowed to use that word. I don't want to be associated with prosecution.
Right. And especially, how I feel about that. But yeah, like we're bringing the case, right? And so you would think that it's less similar, but no, what I learned is on the plaintiff side, we have this individual that comes in, they've been harmed in some way, and we are representing individuals against, again, an entire institution. It's not the government.
Right.
It's something even more powerful, really, because they have lobbyists, mostly insurance companies. So they come with the force of the insurance company behind them. So it's real. There's a lot of similarities with the clients because, at the end of the day, it's some institution that has, you're representing them against an institution.
Right. So you maintains that kind of that David versus Goliath mentality of that you're dealing with the force of the government behind you, but then you're right. You have insurance companies, you've got corporations, you've got, multi-billion-dollar entities that you're fighting against and sometimes against all odds. And it's kind of the same thing, when you have your, criminal context. And I don't have as much, rarely any, criminal experience that you guys have. So, but I see what you're saying and kind of understanding that, look, there are those similarities because at the end of the day, we're still fighting for the injured, the less fortunate, the disenfranchised. We do civil rights work as well here. So, they kind of go hand in hand. So
that's a perfect segue. And by the way, while you downplay your experience, I mean, you've tried a federal criminal case. A lot of people can't say that. You've tried state criminal cases. So, I mean, you have the experience and the knowledge. But civil rights is exactly what I wanted to talk about. That is the one common thread, which is when you can do 1983 work, where it's usually a police officer or governmental entity who's done your client wrong. That's the basis of the injustice. It could be everything as quote unquote minor as an unlawful search, all the way to as serious as excessive force. And obviously, the past couple of years, especially, maybe a light has shined brighter on that area than it otherwise did, but it's always been there. And I find that when we can help people who have been wronged by the government or police agencies, but we're doing it through the civil side, that's a perfect marriage between, what kind of gets me excited. Helping people where the system has done them wrong and you want to fight to get them justice. Keila, I know you've now seen both sides of that. How do you feel about that?
1983 claims are, I agree, that is the merge between that civil and that criminal element because, it is the government and it's the government that's wronged an individual. But in a criminal sense, you are fighting for an individual who's been wronged by the government. You're fighting for their liberty. The government brings the case against this individual that's been wronged. And what I like the most about civil 1983 claims is that in some way you attempt to hold the officers and the government accountable for what they've done to your client. And so it feels really good that same client, if you're able to not only fight for their liberty, but say, this was wrong.
Right.
And this is not just wrong, it's legally wrong. And so you should be compensated for it, or you should, bring this civil claim. I think that's the best part of the civil the civil side of 1983 in these kinds of cases.
Right, and your accountability statement. I mean, you got to hold people accountable, and it's the same. Whether it's the government, whether it's corporations, whether it's insurance companies, it's ironic. They always think it's the plaintiff's lawyers. It's we're the ones that are the bad people doing the bad things. When really, if everything was done correctly, we wouldn't have a job. Right.
Exactly.
We're not. The only thing we're doing is the only thing we can do, which is seek redress in our courts. We ask this question sometimes in juries, like our system of justice allows for the recovery of money. That's the way it works. If it didn't, if you couldn't recover money, what would you have? Like, how would you compensate someone for a harm or a loss? Right. And no one has the answer to that question, right? And so the accountability when you hold, because obviously in Florida we have sunshine laws, like very open public records. It's public. There's a court filing, and if and when you're successful, you hold them accountable publicly, right? So that kind of you can see and start to effectuate change, because if something happens and then it happens again and it happens again, I mean, then you have a pattern of conduct, and sometimes DOJ gets involved, and we've seen that with the city of Miami, for instance, and their police policies. So, that kind of stuff is what's important, and being able to kind of fight back against the government.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're talking about 1983 cases, and there's no question that's the common ground. There's a lot of elements that you can borrow from both sides, including what people don't really think about, which is, oftentimes in a 1983 case, your client might be in custody, serving a stretch in prison. One of the more recent cases, John and I got to try in federal district court, a 1983 case, excessive force. Our client was serving, I think, 30 years. And that's an interesting dynamic, but it's one familiar to those that have done criminal defense work. And so I think as much as there's some commonality at the end of the day, painting in broad strokes here, you rarely, though, on the civil side, are dealing with someone who's in custody. You are never dealing with someone where a loss in their lawsuit results in a loss of their liberty. Sometimes their liberty's already been taken, right? If they're so injured, they can't do the things they did before. But I can't turn back the hands of time. And I will say, what I do miss on some level is having that deep connection with a client where stakes are exceedingly high. Sometimes effectively life. I mean, even a 10-year prison sentence, that is life-altering, period, end of story. And you don't have those same touch points with the jail and prison system. Keel, I don't know how you feel about that, or if you, I don't want to say missed that, or, where that was emotionally for you as a professional, and how you sit now.
Yeah, it's, I was just talking about this earlier today. The feeling when you have someone, when you're representing someone whose liberty is at stake. So in criminal, it is their liberty, meaning their ability to move freely throughout this world is restricted, whether they are incarcerated or probation or community service or house arrest. You're fighting for that person's liberty. So there's a lot of weight. It's a different kind of weight that's on you. And I loved being a public defender. I really genuinely did. And but I didn't realize how heavy it was, because I took my cases very seriously. I connected with my clients. I did the best job that I could possibly do because I believe in what I'm doing, right? And so moving to the civil side, it's a different kind of weight, that weight of someone's liberty, because when someone's liberty is at stake, it's not just them. It is their families, right? You're taking an individual out of their family and you're mixing it all up. And it just has this ripple effect throughout the community that you are taking this individual from. On the civil side, it's not. You are trying to get your client compensated for a wrong, an injury most times, or some kind of wrong that's been done to them. So even though you have that pressure, there's still pressure to compensate this person, this client, for the wrong that's been done. It's a different kind of heaviness. It's different. It's a different kind of pressure.
I would say, I don't want to presuppose anything. I only know my own experience, but John and I, it's not an accident that, you were an important hire for us, and we're so grateful that you came. It's also not an accident that other people in our office have that experience being a public defender. I found, and I still believe, that if you've had the experience, significant experience, standing between the government and someone's liberty, then when you have to just fight over money or making someone whole with money, no matter how serious it is, you can deal with that pressure a lot better. At least that's what I've found. And so that's a trait that, look, not everyone's going to have that experience. It's not to suggest you must have it to be effective in civil, not at all. But for me, for my psyche, you talk about carrying things home with you at night. It's a lot less weight. Well, so